A challenge that all of us face when we try to take a trip out of the Houston area is that anywhere you might want to go, you have to travel at least 2 hours, sometimes more, to get anywhere of great interest. And if you're like my family, any journey, be it to the north, to the south, to the east, or to the west, must include a pit stop at Buc-ee's. Buc-ee's has become a modern-day mecca for the Texas traveler. When our gas is low or our bladders are full, most of us say a little prayer from the road that goes something like this: "Please, God, let there be a Buc-ee's nearby." And like any great pilgrimage place, Buc-ee's makes it very easy to follow the right path. Billboards decorate the highways with that familiar, lovable beaver, letting us know how many miles it is until we find the next sanctuary for a clean bathroom, cheap gas, or a galaxy of goodies for a little nosh. It was at a Buc-ee's pit stop this past summer when I was struck by my surroundings, caused me to pause and think to myself, this might make a good sermon for the High Holy Days. So here you have it. You see, at that brief and much needed pit stop, I noticed that the guy standing right next to me at the sink in the men's room had a gun in his holster over his shorts. It was the first time I had ever seen open carry since it went into effect in 2016. But the discomforts I may have felt at that sink were quickly overtaken by an even greater observation. As I stepped into the highly over-air-conditioned space that was the shopping area of Buc-ee's, I found myself surrounded by people from all walks of life. There were scantily clad people with ink covering every exposed surface of their bodies. There were people rushing in and out of the aisles with their children looking for their favorite snacks. There were people who were in perfectly pressed shorts and loafers and designer shirts, and there were people wearing flip-flops and bathing suits. At that moment, it occurred to me that everyone, including the guy next to me with the gun, was there for the exact same reason: clean bathrooms, cheap gas, tasty nosh. It did not matter what our political views may have been regarding guns or any other matter of the day. It did not matter how much money we had. It did not matter what language we spoke. It did not matter what color of skin we may have had, who we voted for, or who we choose to love. All that mattered for any one of us in that Buc-ee's at that time was that this roadside travel center was here to take care of our basic human needs. It was after this epiphany at Buc-ee's that I decided to take a poll of our congregation. My theory was that most people are concerned about the same things. Granted, my poll was limited to a small congregation in Houston, Texas, but I wanted to see if even in this small sample of our population, we might find some insights into our common humanity. The question that I sent you after this trip was, what keeps you up at night? Each of you received that in an email, and I asked you to send me 5 things that keep you up at night. I received 83 answers consisting of a little over 150 different answers. Before I give you the significant statistics, let me allow me to share with you some of my favorite answers. What keeps you up at night? My husband snoring, a crying baby, the cat, the chocolate I ate for dessert, my ex-wife, the neighbor's backyard lights, finding a nice Jewish boy. And here are my 2 absolute favorites: West Coast Astros games and whether I paid my HCRJ dues. Now for the more serious statistics, and I thank Justin Deutsch for crunching these numbers for me and helping me sort all these things out. Of the 83 responses, here is a breakdown of the top 10. 53% of the respondents were kept up at night by the political climate of our country. 40% listed health care and well-being of their children. 38% personal health issues. 28% listed family matters. 23% emotional distress or angst. 18% pondered over work-related issues. 17% were concerned about social injustice in our society. 17% also were concerned about climate change and environmental matters. 13% worried about the state of Israel, and 10% mulled over to-do lists before they went to sleep. These top 10 responses may be very specific to our community, but I would venture to guess that if we offered this same question and survey to any community in the United States, maybe even in the world, regardless of faith, regardless of ethnic identity, we would probably end up with the same top 5 or 6 matters. Why? Because we are all human. Certainly we have our differences, but the truth is, when all of our differences are stripped away, a general sense of security for ourselves, for our families, and for our nation rise to the top of our most pressing concerns. When we combine these concerns with our basic needs for food and water and clean air, we find very few differences between one human being and another. In the grand scheme of life, this kind of perspective on our humanity can go a long way in helping us find pathways to bridge the toxic, polarizing forces which have become so prevalent in our world today. In a recent op-ed in the New York Times, columnist David Brooks makes a powerful observation about the challenges of living within the excesses of what he calls hyper-individualism. Brooks points out that there is a lot of emphasis in our culture on personal freedom, self-interest, self-expression, and the idea that life is an individual journey toward personal fulfillment. As Americans, these personal freedoms and these interests to promote the self are certainly what makes us who we are and how we thrive. But it comes with a cost. When we focus too much on ourselves, our interactions with and our concerns about the broader world can often be compromised. According to Brooks, if we intend to address the shortcomings of our self-centered society, we are going to need to find a way to generate an ethos that puts relationship over the self, where the collective we precedes me. This past July, our country celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 lunar landing. Through this celebration, we recognized one of the greatest engineering achievements in history, as Neil Armstrong became the first human being to set foot on the lunar surface. One giant step for mankind. Right. The collective we of the world preceded the individual importance of that step. And that step brought another first for human beings as well. And that was images of the Earth from the moon. These views from space were transforming. They allowed us to consider the world and its challenges from a godly perspective. It is humbling to gaze upon the earth from outer space. From space, we seem so small. From outer space, the earth and all that's in it looks like a complete unit, a big marble floating in the space. From outer space, the concept of humanity may be considered in the way we might imagine God sees and understands us, where the tribal affinities that divide us become petty and inconsequential. From the vantage point of 239,000 miles from the earth, the collective we reigns supreme over the individualized me. And this perspective is central to the day of judgment as well. On this day, we strive to judge ourselves and our behaviors from this godly perspective. Facing our shortcomings and embracing our successes, we consider ourselves as whole beings rather than fragments of good and bad. And this is exactly how we need to judge others as well. The term that Brooks uses in his article is radical mutuality. He argues that the starting point of our perspectives of those around us need to be rooted in the idea that regardless of where society may place us, we are all equal. When we stereotype and second-guess the motives of others, or judge them entirely on superficialities like, hey, that guy has a gun in his holster next to me, then we compromise the fabric of our humanity and generate relationships which are rooted in our differences rather than in our commonalities. This can lead to a culture of ugliness, suspicion, and distrust. If, on the other hand, we are able to find ways to love across boundaries, listen more patiently, and see each other in ways that allow us to feel more connected, then we can be weavers of relationships and builders of trust and understanding. This concept of radical mutuality is of particular importance as this new year unfolds. Why? Because in the coming months, our nation will be fully immersed in an election year. And given the polarized society that we have become, we need to desperately find ways to see and respect each other despite the differences we have. We need to remember that at the core of who we are, we share the same needs. We need to remember that when we go to sleep at night, we all worry about very similar things. We need to remember that in the grand scheme of things, we are not so different, though we may confront the challenges of life in diverse ways, and we may choose to approach global issues through conflicting political strategies. We are all really wanting the same things for ourselves, for our children, and for our futures. Rosh Hashanah, this day of judgment, invites us to consider the issues that divide us from the vantage point of the moon. We need to see ourselves and others the way God sees us, equal in our capacities for good as well as evil, equal in our blessings and equal in our flaws, equal in our capabilities to grow, and equal in our capacities to change. So as we collectively seek to establish a new year filled with sweetness and blessings for all, pledge with me here today to honor humanity in all of our ways possible by being less dismissive in the face of conflict and disagreement. Pledge with me here today to make a concerted effort to approach those who may see things differently with an open ear and an open heart. Pledge with me here today to try to engage others with more curiosity and far less judgment, and pledge with me here today a temperament of radical mutuality, where we can begin to see that our commonalities do indeed supersede our differences. May the year 5780 be a year of peace and understanding for all. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be so.